Hi, and welcome to the Unpacking Possibility podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stein, and I'm so excited to have psychic medium Lauren Rainbow with me today. Now, Lauren's journey may sound on the surface a little different from some of the other guests because we're really delving deeply into the spiritual and intuitive realm. But I think what you'll find is that her journey will resonate with you. Her aha moments and following her intuition and trusting herself and really manifesting a life that is in line with who she truly is. So without further ado, welcome, Lauren.
Hey, good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you, Tracy. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Before we go deep into your life, this is what everybody fears about psychologists. That will do that. But tell people who may not know the difference between being psychic and being a medium and what those terms mean.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's a more common term these days. And if you don't mind, Tracy, I can actually add the word intuition into that.
Absolutely.
Because I think we talk about intuitive, psychic, and mediumship, which to me are like three levels and three tiers of a way of working with our ability to sense and feel the world. So I always like to start talking about intuition, which is our inner voice. It's that inner guidance system that we have, usually from the heart space or that gut intuition, that feeling that we know where we're going in the world. So I believe everybody in the world has intuitive moments and can navigate their world learning to feel, to sense, to be aware of what's going on around them. So I always say intuition is into you, intuition into you. And then the next perception, the next level of that is psychic awareness. And the way I like to convey is psychic awareness is now using our ability to perceive the world around us more. So we go from the inner navigation system to like an outer perspective way of reaching around the world, and now being able to feel and connect with folks like yourself who come into our atmosphere and how they may be moving with us and kind of psychically through the world. As a working psychic, also, we have the ability to perceive individuals and kind of get an idea of where you may be headed in the world. So it's important, I think, when we talk about psychic awareness, that when you work with somebody who is psychic or intuitive, that it's important to know that you always have control. Like what we're doing is not to define your life. Your life is still your kind of your choice, you're choosing. But a good psychic intuitive can tune into you in this moment and see potentially where you may be going based on the choices that you may be kind of filtering through your mind in this moment. And then mediumship and working with now spirit. So mediumship to me is what I call the higher tier. We're going from the inner voice or intuition to perceiving your world. And then mediums receive information from energies. Usually, most commonly, we're aware of mediumship as departed loved ones. So if you have folks and friends and family and spirit who are connected with you, we have the ability to receive from these energies information, evidence, messages that can help you feel connected to all the folks that are around you, still loving and supporting you, even though they may not still be walking beside you here in the physical realm. So that's how I kind of break those down in a more simple manner.
I think it's great. And, I find that I often use words like psychic and intuitive interchangeably. For a lot of people, intuitive is more palatable, but you're making an important distinction. One of the reasons I wanted you to come and tell about your journey and your work today is not only because it's so fascinating and so engaging, but also because I think that most people don't realize that they have some intuitive capacity. Maybe more than they realize. And that our higher self, I'm going to say, is always trying to communicate with us in some way. And the more ready we are, the more easily we can kind of tap into the stuff that's really important for us.
Yes.
But I agree with you. We make our own decisions. I don't know how many things are truly fated or not, but it's more information. And I just think it's one of those things that it's kind of like a muscle that people don't think to strengthen. So I feel like, once you do start kind of flexing that muscle, all of a sudden life becomes very different. Your whole world, it's like you can't go back to the vista that you had the day before.
Exactly. And that kind of goes into what spiritual awakening is. And so, Tracy, if you want, I can dive in a little bit about
Yeah, please
how,
do.
what I say to a lot of people is I didn't wake up as a child and say, I'm going to be a medium one day. That wasn't my plan in life. I woke up, I was, when I was, brought into this world, I was a normal child-ish. I guess we all have a little bit of uniqueness in us. And, in my young years as a child, I definitely was drawn to psychic stuff. It was really fascinating to be a child of the 80s, to have parents who were both teachers and really let me be me. When you look back on your life too, as you may know, we look back on our lives and you kind of go, wow, this has always been there. And a fascinating thing for me as a child was sacred sites of all things. I was drawn to things like Stonehenge and the pyramids and understanding these really ancient worlds and fascinated by that. And in my young years, I was also attracted to learning about psychic work. Now, this may sound funny, but as a young child, I used to read a lot of Stephen King. And what I find fascinating about Stephen King was his characters always had metaphysical abilities. They either had the ability like Firestarter to start, fires, or which, hopefully nobody really can do that. But, the ability to interchange, to be sensitive, to be psychic, to have, telekinesis. All of his characters always had metaphysical powers. And that's what I was drawn to, was not so much the horror and any, which is amazing writing of his anyway, but I was attracted to the characters' abilities. And so in little things like that, you can kind of see that through my life, I was always intrigued by the ability to have extra senses and extra abilities. But going on into college and studying, my goal, I studied to be a journalist. I left college. I worked at a newspaper in northern Vermont called The Messenger. So the other beautiful thing about it is life is synchronistic. Like the universe is always trying to get you where you need to be. And sometimes we're fussy about it. We may kind of not see it right away. In working for The Messenger, I was a hard news reporter. So my job was covering death and dying every day. I had no idea that would lead to understanding me as a medium in the beginning, but I left that job to move into a different area of Massachusetts and go into graphic design. Ironically, I left a newspaper of death and dying and moved into a retired funeral home in Lowell. And so it's like synchronistic. So here I am thinking that I'm getting out of this realm of hard news, which as a journalist, I really wanted to be, the kind of journalist that told more positive stories. And so hard news was really tough for me. So I ended up saying, I'll go to design for a while because I also had training in that. And then here living in the funeral home, energy just started really getting palpable for me. And I was laid off from my job the day before 9/11 happened. And the day after 9/11 happened, which was a major shift for a lot of people, yes. And now 2020 has also been a major shift of awakening. Yeah. I don't think we've had one since as big as, 9/11 was big. 2020 is huge in comparison. Yeah. But a lot of us woke up around 9/11 spiritually. I was 24 years old. And so I was really young. I was single and I was a free spirit. So I was unemployed and a friend of mine called me and said, come to this metaphysical shop. We're going to meditate on healing the planet. And I went, what is that? And I walked into the doors of this metaphysical shop. And I met an amazing community of people who took me in for 4 years. And while I was living a bit of an unemployed life or having odd jobs, I really got immersed in this community of amazing healers. So I was trained heavily in the beginning with Reiki and IET, all these energy therapies. Meanwhile, spirit was speaking to me. And so I was lost, but yet found at the same time. And I spent a lot of time in the early years of my spiritual life, as I now call it, very heavily trained in metaphysics, in esoteric sciences, energetic working. And the only thing I wasn't getting trained on was spirit. So that to me in the beginning was self-developed. We had John Edward on TV doing Crossing Over. Right. So I was like, I know how to do that. And I would just start sitting with people, feeling their loved ones and start giving them information. So I started off as a self-taught medium. And as you know, many years later, again, synchronistic events would bring me to, I tried to get a professional job working in a theater as a box office manager because I love theater. And 2 weeks later, I met a guy who's like, I know what you do outside of this place. So he had heard that I was a medium. And he's like, I want to put you on stage. I love your laugh. I love your character. And I want to see what happens when we put you on stage. And that relationship still continues today. This gentleman still manages my work, and he has put me on stages all over New England. And that changed my life. So synchronistically, I had no idea at, 4 years old that I would have ever graced the stage to bring messages from spirit loved ones. But that's all synchronistic events. So you just never know where life is leading you. It's courageous, by the way, if I can say this to you, Tracy. I think it's extremely courageous of anyone to learn to listen to their intuition. You understand too. It's more so common now, but even in the early 2000s, when I was coming out of the closet as a medium, it was still a very scary thing to do. It wasn't embraced as easily. It's still not, it's much more welcome in the world now, but the reality is it's part of all of us. And to learn to at least get intuitive about who you are, to tap into that intuitive voice and access it, to me, is what changed my life. The other last synchronistic thing I'll share, and if there's any questions about it, is you're like,
no, I mean, you're doing exactly what I was hoping you would.
One of the wonderful things is we go back to my childhood, and I said I loved sacred sites, and I was very drawn to places like Stonehenge and Egypt. When in 2004, in the early stages of my spiritual journey, I was brought to Peru. I had done a sacred journey to England, and I was brought to Peru with this gentleman. Was down there for almost a month and journeying through shamanic Peru, meeting shamans and having these amazing experiences. And I had this dream that one day I would bring people to sacred sites and do these journeys, because that was one of many that I had done as a participant that changed my life. Coming to these old sites and stepping into a sacred way of honoring the earth and honoring these ancient energies, but yet taking in and connecting to these amazing power centers that we have to heal the planet, but open ourselves up, was so amazing to me. I get goosebumps as I talk about this. So as much as I love being a medium, that to me was just a foundation. The heart of my work is now, in 2017, I did my first sacred journey as a leader to Teotihuacan, Mexico. I've led 5 journeys since then. Wow. The last one, as you might know, was right at the beginning of the pandemic. I brought a journey to Egypt, and we got to Egypt through there safely and home safely to land into the pandemic. But it's an amazing opportunity that I, as a young child, was attracted to. Again, not understanding at 4 years old. And my mother, God bless her for being open-minded enough to go, my daughter, all she does is draw pyramids everywhere she goes, and now it's a major part of my work. And as you said, there are hard parts in this journey. Awakening wasn't always easy. There is what we call shadow works and deep dives you have to do into your soul and your psyche. And that's an ongoing journey. I've been on a spiritual journey for 20 years, and I have a lot of deep dives every so often. But the greatest part of living an intuitive life, I am living a life that is so full of joy and that is so blessed and that is beyond my wildest dreams. I could never have dreamt of the life I now live. It is just such a blessing to be able to have these amazing experiences, but to also help folks be empowered to have these amazing experiences as well. So it's an amazing opportunity. That's why I say it's so brave for anybody who wants to learn to connect to their inner intuition. Start there. The rest will unfold for you, but to do that. And I know that you understand this in some way. Leading an intuitive life will just open doors that you can't even begin to imagine. So, and I'm sure in some of the, folks that you'll speak with and people across many different, walks of life also speak probably an intuitive language, even though they may not use that word. But we know even techniques like meditation, simple meditation and awareness is a practice that we're now seeing across many walks of life, and many, many, many highly successful people in this world have these practices. So it's out there.
It totally is. It totally is. I don't even want to interrupt your flow because everything you're saying, like as you're talking, I can see like you're painting such a really vivid picture of your journey. And I can imagine, first of all, I still crack up when you talk about the messenger because I do feel like the universe has a sense of humor.
Yeah, dude, they do.
These little things along the way that you're like, seriously? Or that you moved into a funeral home, retired funeral home. But it's interesting what you're saying is, because if I go back to when you were, this child and you paid attention to the things that really resonated with you, I feel like even people who aren't thinking about things in terms of being intuitive or having a life path, I think people are intuitive and I think we have a life path. Yeah. I feel like our souls start speaking to us from the beginning, and the things that really resonate with us are the things that might make us an odd kid. Like drawing the pyramids. My father had some book on like Egyptology or something. And it wasn't even a thing for him. It was like the one book. But I remember being a young kid reading that book. And I remember like the things that I thought I wanted to do when I was very young was like to be a psychic, which was weird because I had a lot of psychic experiences, to be a detective because I liked to know things, to be a psychologist or an Egyptologist. Yeah. And, the Egyptology thing has not yet manifested, but, you can see where your soul is trying to tell you what it is that resonates with you and move you along your path once you're open.
Yeah.
And then when we're so intellectualized or feel all this pressure to be something different, it kind of gets in the way and we just don't feel like we're in the flow. Yeah. You feel like you're in the flow because you're doing what you are.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Well, and there's also something I think that's really important to understand as well is when you're open intuitively, and, we had talked about like the universe has a language. And I think they do have a sense of humor, as you said, but I always say the universe speaks in your language. I'm a humorous person. I spent a lot of time on stage, by the way, being an actress before I even stepped on stage as a medium. And I like sarcasm. So I find that the universe is sarcastic with me. I mean, hello, working at the Messenger, moving into a funeral home. Like, it's like, okay, they're speaking a language I understand. Some people may not understand that language, but the universe, it's trusting that when we say the universe, or I like to say spirit with a capital S, meaning all of the energy that's around us, it's not a dictatorship. The universe doesn't dictate anything to you. And I think that's something that people need to understand. What it is energy is available to propel us forward and to help us move through things. And sometimes they're going, hello, Lauren, we're waiting for you right here. So why don't you try this first? And then we're going to try this next and see if you kind of get it. And we still have the choice to say no. I always say like the messenger and yes, it's synchronistic to work for a newspaper with that title and then end up being a messenger of spirit. But the other amazing thing about being a journalist is as a medium, as you might know, or for people who may not understand, when we're working with spirit, there's a conversation that's going on with energy, your loved ones who are coming to me in energy, and learning to interview people as I did as a journalist has given me ability to interview spirit. So all of the things I even learned as a journalist are tools that I now use with the spirit world. Who knew, that when I was, in college, wanting to write these amazing stories about people, even in the living, has now become an ability to tell the stories of those who are no longer here with us. So it's also understanding that even though I was in a different line of work, all that I did before my spiritual life were tools in the box that I still use now in my life today. And I think that's something that some people don't understand is they go, well, why did I go this way if this is where I'm going? Because something there is important for where you're going. I have a lovely woman I know out there. She's a medical intuitive. She started off in the world as nursing. It gave her all the language she needed to become a medical intuitive. Absolutely. So these pieces are part of who you are. They're part of the journey. They're never going down the wrong road. When I was in the funeral home and I really started to feel spirit, I had a choice. I had a choice to ignore it. I always, jokingly say, and you might lovingly appreciate this, I hope, in the psychology world, but I thought like I need either a psychiatrist or a psychic development class. I didn't know which way to go. Am I crazy or is something happening, And again, the universe said, I ran into a gentleman in a bar one night and he sat down next to me. He's like, "You see dead people?" And I go, "Why, yes, I do. How do you know?" And it just became this moment of the universe saying, let me see if I can help you. We want to, and he's like, "Well, I know psychic development teachers. Do you want to take a class?" And I was literally not joking when I was telling you, I'm like, I think I need to either see a psychiatrist or figure out what's going on here. And the universe introduced me into a direction. Now I could have sat there and said, "No, I'm not going to do this." But I went, "Okay, universe, you're bringing me an opportunity." And that was a choice I made. So that's important to know, is that we always make choices. Had I have chosen to not take that psychic development opportunity, who knows what would have happened? It might have taken me 6 years later to get to this point. It doesn't mean that the path is gone. It just means in this moment, I need more time. And I think it's important that people understand is if you make a choice, because I think sometimes we struggle with choices that we make and go, "Oh, did I make that right choice later?" You're always making a choice, whether it's good or bad. I don't judge anymore. If there's one thing I learned, I don't judge the quality of my choice. I've learned, rather than like I made a mistake, I don't look at that anymore as a mistake. I rather go, okay, I needed more time, or I needed a little bit more knowledge, or I needed a little bit more information before I got to that next step. Does that make sense? So I think it's important that people understand too, when they question their choices and something bad happens or something, or they think something bad happens, again, it's a judgment. But if you can learn to not judge the outcome of your choice and go, okay, something else I've chosen to learn in this moment, it's never a wrong decision. It's just about what your soul is guiding you for in that moment.
So that makes perfect sense to me. The one thought though that's coming to mind related to that is that, it's okay that we're not ready for certain things in the moment, but it does take a tremendous amount of energy to avoid being who we actually are.
True.
So it's not, some people live their whole lives and they're like, this is the box that I'm allowed to function in, and whether we're talking about being a psychic or being an actor or being an accountant or whatever it is, we have all this, societal or familial or just internal pressure to be, to have it almost be easier or not make waves sometimes, not everybody, but, and sometimes I think, okay, well, if not in this life, then in the next. But it's exhausting to try to be somebody you aren't, and I think a lot of people who are naturally intuitive struggle with that. And the one thing I want to say is, and I can't remember if we've spoken about this because I've spoken with so many other intuitives. I don't want to say you're just one of many, but that's not what I mean.
No, I get it.
It's like a common thread. You do any intuitive training. I'm not a professional intuitive, but intuition comes into my daily life all the time. And, I tried to explain this to somebody at one point, like when I am doing intuitive work, just for practice or whatever, or for someone randomly once in a blue moon, or just paying attention to my own, when I'm doing that, or when I'm writing or in the flow of working with people, I feel more real and more alive than I do at almost any other time in my life. And it's hard to articulate that well for me. And there's something incredibly liberating. It's like realizing that there really is magic in the world. And how exciting is that this thing that, as a child, you wanted to believe is actually true. But there's something else you said about not being sure if you should have a psychiatrist or start doing more intuitive development, psychic development. And I think that is so common for people.
Yeah.
And look, some people, being a mental health professional, I'm thinking of one person in particular who I think was very intuitive and also very mentally ill.
Yeah.
So those things can coexist. And I think if we don't have a way to understand intuition, and I don't think that's the only reason this person was mentally ill, but it can be really destabilizing.
Absolutely. And if I can, and this is, I think, a powerful conversation I'd love to even share with you in this moment, because I think our worlds are beautifully colliding. I think as someone who's needed psychiatric support in my life, even in the spiritual realm, as a human going through this life, just because I'm intuitive and I work with the universe doesn't mean I'm emotionally a perfect person. So there's always been moments where I've needed, guidance and support on that side. But there's also, I think, more studies that we're starting to see where we're understanding when we're intuitive, and a friend of mine, Joe Shield, has done, we're scanning brains now of psychics. There's a lot of science going out there where they're plugging psychics into these, brain scanners. You probably know the better terminology of that, and starting to read what happens to our minds when we go into these intuitive spaces. And they're learning that mediumship, especially, is very similar functioning to, brains that are going into almost schizophrenic-like energies. So it shows you that we're mentally going into two different spaces. So I think are sometimes folks, and I'm sure you may see that, who are struggling with mental illnesses that are perhaps highly spiritual people who just need really good guidance and training on how to understand their abilities. And so it's a fine line, I think, that we're dancing. And I'm excited when I see like some of my friends who are in the world of psychology sending and connecting with me, and vice versa, that these two worlds do need to come together. I think the word psychic has psyche in it for a reason. And if we really can allow these worlds to continue to come together and to embrace that what is happening to me as an intuitive is not a fake thing, it is, and that science is now showing that there's actual shifts in the chemistry of the brain when we're in these spaces. I think that can change the world right now. Okay. And as I said to you, Tracy, 2020 in my work has been phenomenally amazing in how many people have had an awakening shift in this last year. Now that we're in 2021, I'm still seeing it, but I know I met a crew of people who had the shift of one day of 9/11. We've had a whole year and more of trauma, and trauma to me opens intuition on a lot of levels. So a lot of people right now are, and maybe, I'm not sure if you even see this in your work, are feeling more, seeing more, have a new awareness. And I think the more that we can bring these two worlds together and let them support each other, the more that we're going to begin to even be able to help support people on a whole different level.
What you just said, I think, is so true. And it reminds me of something I wanted to kind of ask you your thoughts on, because disclosure. So I did do a training with you and John Holland, another fabulous medium, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, a 5-day training. It was incredible. So anyone who's thinking of doing any sort of medium training, definitely look up Lauren. Really. And I'm not being gratuitous. It's completely true. Like, you are, as much as you are light and fun and engaging, you are super accurate. You demand a lot of yourself. You do. And actually, that's why I think your journalistic skills really show through, because you're not saying, oh, take this if it doesn't fit. And you are really going into the detail. Mm-hmm. And actually, before I get to the other thing, a quick aside is when we were going to buy this house, now 4 years ago, we hadn't bought it yet. We were thinking about it. You asked me if it was on a mountain, and it actually is on a mountain, and it is on Mountain Avenue. Oh, yeah. and I was like, holy crap. And you said it wasn't going to be our last house. And I remember thinking, oh my God, moving's so exhausting. And, as we've talked about, I have all kinds of feelings about moving on now, but it was in the ether, and you were so specific about that and other details, and you weren't trying to persuade me. You're just offering what you got, mm-hmm. and it was detailed and panned out. And I do think that you hold yourself to a high standard. That it's not just vague, it's not just vague stuff that would be easy to say yes or no to. But that aside, during this training with you and with John Holland, again, another really gifted medium, I remember somebody in the audience asked the question about closing down or boundaries. And John, I think, I hope I don't misquote him, but had said that he doesn't really feel like he has to think about that because he only connects to higher energies. As a person who, again, who does not do professional intuitive work, but where it comes into my work all the time, I've I am very sponge-like, and sometimes I wind up with other people's headaches or stomach aches or fatigue or, and it can last like for days. And it's been challenging. And that can even be just in a conversation with somebody. And so my experience, and I know other people have said that the importance of having good, maybe you don't have to ground so much if you're, only connecting to things that are really positive, but your energetic boundaries have to be really clear. And I wanted you to talk about that, because when you talk about people who are like, am I psychic or am I mentally ill? I think there are people who walk around and are so sponge-like that they feel physically and mentally ill.
Yeah.
It's harder for them to realize it's not their stuff. Now, tell me what you think about that.
That's so huge, especially right now. Again, we've got a lot going on in the world. Stuff is coming up, and empathy is a superpower. It is not a negative, but that's really a struggle. So what I often say here is, first off, we have to understand that as individuals, everybody's psychic ability, intuitive ability, mediumship ability is as unique as your fingerprint. Not one of us is designed the same. And if you're highly sensitive, and in many ways, I'm highly sensitive, but I also have a strong mental awareness of when I'm working, I'm in that space. The minute I'm done working, my mind is not there. And so I love to say, where your mind goes, energy flows, and learning to have that. It's a practice of awareness. And for those who are highly empathic, this is going to sound really strong, but you know me, I'm really, Tracy, I'm a really realistic person. When I teach I teach truth. I won't ever lie. And sometimes it's a hard truth. The hard truth is, if you're empathic and you're overwhelmed by other people, and I think in psychology, it's different. I mean, I know in a similar way, when I'm working with clients all day, it can be exhausting. So I've had to learn my own boundaries of what can I manage for my energy, what I could do at 24 years old and what I can do in my 40s. So different. So I've had to adjust my life accordingly so that I can take care of my mental, my emotional, and my spiritual health. So I think always being in tune to what works for you and working in the best way that your energy works is so important. For empathic people, this is a tough one, but I say, if you're feeling other people's stuff, the challenge as a psychic even or an intuitive is, unless you're sitting in front of me and you have taken the choice to work with me in this manner, what you're going through is not my business. And so while I may walk around the world and feel people who may be going through things, what I can't do and what's irresponsible for me to do is to dive into their stuff intuitively.
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of people, they'll feel, and because they're feeling, they think, oh, I must have to fix this. And the reality, I think, that just starts to shift that boundary awareness is recognizing it's not your business if they have not opened the door to you. And it's also not your job to fix somebody else's problems because they have to have their life journey. And that awareness for me, this is just mine practice, has helped me when I'm not in sessions or working, like when I'm hanging out with my friends, I can now be normal and I can live with my friends and knowing that I'm going to support them. If I see a friend who's going through a hard time, I may say, I feel something. I love you. If you need something, I'm here. So I'll give them the opportunity to open the door.
And a different kind of empathy.
Yeah, it's a different
empathy kind of, with good boundaries.
Exactly. But I think the idea of empathy too is recognizing that we all have to have our journey. You can't take away somebody else's life lessons. I had to have my experiences. I had to make some of the horrible choices I made, especially in my 20s, you couldn't have saved me from that. I had to go through that, and it's made me a whole different person now. And so, and it's also something we talk about even in psychic awareness or psychics as well, is, inappropriate behavior, like when intuitives come up to you and just dump information on you also without permission is inappropriate, because
Agreed.
I often say, if I didn't ask for your intuition, I don't need it. I don't want to know it. And so we often have to teach people ethical boundaries here in my work, because just walking around a grocery store and telling a random stranger that their loved ones are with them is inappropriate. And so it's finding those boundaries on so many levels. I hope I'm answering the question, Tracy, at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's awareness. So I think it's a matter of choosing to feel. We want the world to feel, and we want the world to have empathy. We need empathy. It is how you emotionally navigate this world. And for so many generations and decades, we've been taught not to emote, but learning to also, and this is another, I think, important piece, giving people permission to have their emotions without trying to stop it. So It comes down to, like, sometimes if you're sitting with somebody and they're crying and you're like, oh, it's okay. Stop. I always, when people are in session with me and they start to cry, I'm always like, go ahead, grab a tissue box. I'm going to keep going, and let them and hold the space for the emotion to flow, rather than saying, please stop emoting right now because I need to do my job. And that's really, to me, a challenge, in that I would rather hold space for people to emote because it's important, versus trying to shut down the emotion. So I think when we talk about empathy and navigating boundaries, I think number one, I'll try to kind of summarize that, but number one, be careful of what's your business and what you're getting involved in emotionally. You can send love to people. When someone's in trouble, we have this amazing power called prayer. And in prayer, you can just send the intelligent, healing love energy to anybody and trust that that love will bring some support to those that you have. So you're not disempowered. You have power. But it's not your business unless they've opened the door to you. You can hold space for people who are having emotion and allow them to have the emotion without judgment and learning to not take it personal. To put out one teaching that is a major foundation of my work is the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. In my teaching, I teach people, and most people actually have it on their bookshelf. I've never read it. So you probably have it in your
I do have it.
Right. And I think it's a wonderful basic tool for life. And so I often encourage every student of mine to read this book. It saves my life every day. Being impeccable with what I say has power. Not taking it personal because we don't always understand what people have going on inside themselves. There's 4 basic agreements in there that will change your life. And to me is the structure and the foundation of my spiritual well-being. So a lot of these tools are also spiritual tools. And I think it's just really important to have, as you say, healthy boundaries, ethical boundaries, to love people who are there, let them have their journey, and hold space for their emotional well-being without feeling like you have to fix anything. I think that's so important.
I mean, and those are good, that's good advice even for somebody who's training to be a mental health professional, right? Because, empaths feel so deeply and want to heal. And we have to let others have their journey. Yeah. And, what I tell people who either are just naturally intuitive or even just emotionally empathic is just that, people who want to save everybody from themselves is that, those kind of emotional and intuitive boundaries have to be the ones that you would have physically. You wouldn't go to bed and leave your front door wide open.
Right.
You would choose who you let in. You're going to choose if you're going to even answer a phone call.
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone yesterday who, totally different topic, but she needs to have alone time, and she needs to have time when she does not go out with her friends, and just says, all right, I'm going to have time with my favorite person, me, and I'm going to have my tea and read my book. And, we all have our ways of kind of recentering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's really important. But I love that you are not going around with your front door open. And, you see these TV shows where I get it, where somebody's going into a deli and a bookstore and whatever, and just randomly reading people who then start crying. And it makes for good TV. But I wouldn't walk up to someone and tell them that's a horrible outfit, or you're really not parenting well today. Or, we wouldn't do that.
Well, and I think it's important to understand one thing I'll say about TV mediumship. And I know I'm well connected with one of them on TV. It's real mediumship. However, the scenarios are set up. You know, you don't just walk into a dance class with cameras everywhere and people hooked up to microphones like it just wasn't staged. So the situations are staged, but the mediumship is real.
Right.
And so I think that unfortunately in my teaching side has led a lot of people in my development, you know, who are developing going, well, if I get the message, I got to deliver it. No, you don't. And that is something we have to understand is that there, I always say this, you know, the mail, there used to be an expression like, you know, the mail will get delivered one way or another, you know? So if you're in a position, like we think about religious belief systems, you know, it's not appropriate for me to go up to somebody who does not believe in what I do, which I highly respect, by the way, and then dump my belief on you. And so that's even where the respect is. So that's where when we see things like TV mediumship, it's real mediumship. It's staged situations that they're walking into. So that is important for anyone who wants to develop or anybody out there who thinks it's okay to just randomly walk around. I mean, I'll just tell a little bit of a quick story about something that happened to me when I was a young developing medium. A local gentleman here who was kind of a well-known in this area literally walked up to me and said I was going to be dead by the time I was 30. And I was blown away because I didn't ask to be read, and to just walk up to me and tell me that I was going to be dead at that point in 2 years was just inappropriate. And the problem with this work, and for anybody who's listening to this podcast, I think it's so important. If you're seeking psychic and intuitive support, it's real, it's out there. Do it with a healthy mind, because there are some people who do this inappropriately and try to take advantage of people. And so I think that's also sad to say, but true about our industry, which is now a huge industry. 20 years ago, we were barely existing. And now intuition, psychic, and mediumship is a major industry in this world. So it's real in many ways. There are people who use it inappropriately. And so always be in your power. Don't let anyone disempower you. Don't let anybody ever tell you you're cursed and that you need to pay millions of dollars to have this taken care of. That's all, to me, bull. And you have the power to walk away from that. You have the power to say, this is not appropriate, and I'm not going to take that in. Because as you understand, psyche, we can influence people also negatively. And so for this man to tell me that I was going to be dead at 30, I could have taken that in and I could have created that reality. And I said to him, you need to walk away and you need to never approach me again and ever give me information, because this is inappropriate. And I was already, 28 years old when I said that. I was upset, and I felt at least well-developed enough at that point on my spiritual journey to go, I'm not taking that in and I'm not living that reality. And thank God I just turned 45. So we're doing good, but that to me is just inappropriate. And sometimes I think people like to do the shock mediumship, or what I call shock psychic. They're brilliant and it can give you shocking information, but they do that to create fear in you. And I think that's so
ego. It's ego driven.
It's ego driven, but it's also fear driven. They do want to limit you. And I think in any form of teaching, especially in this world today, we see it in all realms now. Cult mentality is a big thing. So I think it's really important that you always stay empowered, that you always stay true to who you are, and that you don't let anybody else try to take over that ability of yours to be empowered and to live an amazing life. So it's a little bit of a tough thing to talk about, but I think it's so important.
It absolutely is. And honestly, a lot of the things like you were just saying that would apply to being healthy and high functioning psychologically and interpersonally apply when you're dealing even with the intangible kind of realm.
Yeah.
And we get to make our choices. We get, I really do think that there are some things we're probably meant to do, or some people we're meant to meet, but we have so many choices along the way.
Yeah.
And I like what you said, you don't want to surrender your power to someone else.
Right.
And you don't have to.
Yeah. Ever. And
I find you a generally empowering person.
Thank you.
And again, I meant it when I said that I think people in general can benefit from doing, their own spiritual, but also psychic development, even if they're not planning to be a professional psychic, and I'll use the example, the person who you'll see, like the mechanic who's really intuitive is the person who finds out what's wrong with your car when no one else can.
Right.
You know, it's the chef who can create a meal that is amazing when somebody else with the same ingredients can't. And it's more, I feel like it's more than just talent. Or the physician who finally finds out why you're not feeling well when, you know, 4 other top people couldn't. Yeah. You know, and then you get the treatment you need and you do well. So I think it's worth doing. And again, I think it's one of the most empowering, potentially life-changing things, you know, certainly that I've allowed myself to do and that I think people can do. So I want you to tell, because I know you're on a tight schedule, tell people where they can learn about you and some of the exciting things you have coming up. You have the card deck. You have probably another journey coming up. Yeah. You have mediumship circles and training. So
so if for anybody who wants to learn more, you can find out more about me at laurenrainbow.com. We have a lovely new website we've just put up there with now wonderful blogs of powerful information. And at very least, as you were just saying, Trace, I'll just, you know, say, whether you want to study psychic, mediumship, or those other pieces, at the very least, I think everybody should try intuition. Learn to understand your inner voice, your inner navigation system. As you're saying, intuition is always speaking through all of us. So there's a lot of things that I'm in the middle of putting up some new offers on my site. So we do offer regular classes on intuition development, psychic mediumship development. But I also have a sacred journey coming up for Egypt in January of 2022. And more to be planned for places like India, Peru, and back to Mexico in later 2022. Let me say that again, 2022 on. So I'm super excited to see that we're getting back out into the world, you know, here and reconnecting with these amazing sites. And if anybody's on Instagram, I'm at Lauren Rainbow Medium, as well on Facebook at Lauren Rainbow Medium, and all of those links you can find on my website.
I love it. And I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to do this today. I love your energy and I think it's great. It's so nice to connect with you.
Thank you for having me. This has been amazing. And I just love that we can talk about, you know, these two powerful realms coming together. So this has been wonderful.
Thank you, Lauren. Well, again, this has been Lauren Rainbow on Unpacking Possibility. I hope what you've learned today can help you unpack your own possibility. And if you like the podcast, please hit like and share and subscribe. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.